You're listening to EdTech Heroes, a podcast that looks at how teachers in today's classrooms can use technology to improve student learning. In each episode, a hero in the world of education will share their story and discuss how innovation can influence the minds of the next generation. Let's jump in.
Hey y'all, and welcome to EdTech Heroes. I'm your host, Neff, and today's guest is Al Thomas. Al is a filmmaker, a photographer, an Adobe education leader, a YouTuber, and the creator of educopilot.com. He also has more than 20 years experience in education as a former teacher, principal, and district administrator. Al, welcome to EdTech Heroes.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to dive in and talk all things video.
I'm excited about that as well. But before we get too deep into the road of video, I want to acknowledge that today's episode is going to air during Teachers Appreciation Week. And I wanted to stop for a second and give a shout out to some of the incredible work that teachers have done for students, for families, and also for each other. I don't know if you've noticed this, but over the past couple of years, I feel like teachers have really rallied around each other to share resources, best practices, and really just keep each other going. So I know that's been happening for as long as teachers have been around, but it seems like it has been so much more profound these last couple of years.
Yeah, I completely agree. I will say over the past few years, we've probably seen it more on display of just the amazing support that educators have given each other to be able to move the ball forward and make sure that our students are continuing to fill the gaps where they need help and support, and also just continue the learning. And just, I'm constantly reminded of just the incredible creative force that are teachers, and the ability for them to find a way, figure out a way, find a support to be able to ultimately make students successful in their learning. So much appreciation to all the teachers that have been a part of my life, both in my educational journey and then also as an educator. So it is truly amazing the work that they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. Is there a particular teacher or maybe a group of teachers that you want to give a shout out to who have done some pretty incredible work lately?
Wow, I think we will take the entire episode if I started naming names. I feel like it's the acceptance speech where I don't want to miss a valuable individual that's really made an impact. What I will just give a shout out to is just to all of the communities of educators who are continuing beyond the hours to continue to share their knowledge, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's in Facebook groups, wherever it may be, sharing information to be able to just meet the need of someone who may be needing something. I think of incredible educators, Claudio Zavala. I think of Tris Puncha. I think of Nicole Taylor. I think of Dee Lanier, Ken Shelton, all educators who truly have a passion for making a change in this world and doing it through education, and share resources and share their time and share their insights. There are so many more, and I am kicking myself because I started naming names and now I feel like I need to keep going. So, but there's so many. And I will take this as a shameless opportunity just to say, if you're not a part of a community or you haven't found a community of educators that you can connect with, I would highly encourage you to do so. I don't know how you can do that, or you cannot survive in this time period without having other educators to lean on. So finding that community that works best for you is so valuable.
Yeah, 100%. And I think to your point, there are so many educators in those communities, whether we're talking about the educators who have thousands of Twitter followers or the educators who have been in the classroom for 25 years and have been on Twitter for 5 minutes, but still have really, really dope things to say. So absolutely, I'm right with you. Find a community, engage with other folks because there is so much value there. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your passion for creativity. I just got a chance to read your mini ebook before we started. And if you're not familiar with Al's ebook, it is probably a 15 or 20-minute read, but chock full of really, really dope ideas that you can implement tomorrow. The ebook actually starts with this amazing quote from Maya Angelou which says you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have, which is such a powerful quote. So I'm wondering, in your educational journey, when did you kind of begin to realize the importance of creativity, especially for the students that you worked with?
Yeah, I think that great question. It's a journey that's been a lifelong journey, I think, for me. If I think back to probably the earliest moment that really resonates was probably when I was in high school. We were reading the story of Beowulf, and I
Mm,
remember it because I was probably at that point where I just didn't want to write another paper. It's probably the best way to sum it up, is because typically that is the way we show what we know. It's the most typical artifact of learning that is used, at least back in that time. And I remember my teacher pulling me to the side after class and just saying, noticing that I was kind of struggling and wanting to take a moment just to kind of talk with me through, like all great teachers do, just recognizing and then making a connection, having conversations. And she boiled it down and just said, "Hey, how would you like to share what you know? How I can clearly tell that you know the story, you've read the story, you could probably continue to regurgitate the information that is needed to show that you know this, but how would you like to share that with the class?" And I said, I'd love to illustrate it. And so she gave me an opportunity to do something outside the norm and share this story through illustration. And for me, it was one of those light bulb moments of, hey, this thing that I do when I'm at home by myself, creating and making things and drawing and capturing, all of these things have value. And in this very important place of a classroom, a school, I'm being given an opportunity to be able to bring that to the classroom.
mm,
And it was so powerful because I think back now and I know she had nothing to be able to say, how am I going to grade this? But she gave me the space to be able to do that. And it created so much of a passion for me to be able to look at how I can bring that to the classroom and help teachers be able to bring more opportunities and to kind of remove some of those preconceived notions of this is the way it has to be done. It needs to fit into this box, but to really look at how creativity can be a force for students sharing what they know and really to bring them their full self into the classroom. So I would say that's probably the earliest, most impactful moment when it comes to creativity for me.
I love that story. And it sounds like you went from a little dejected, not super interested in this idea to something that is life changing. And now, years later, you're telling the story of Beowulf and of illustration and of being able to demonstrate your knowledge in a unique way that truly fit you. What do teachers have to gain when they take this incredible leap of faith? Because you called it out, right? Like, she doesn't have a rubric, she doesn't know what she's doing. Maybe if the principal walked into the room and was like, "What is Al doing over there?" She'd have been like, So why would they take this leap of faith?
Yeah, I think it ultimately comes down to the opportunities that we're creating for students. I think for me, it's always been the classroom is a safe space for us to try things and for us to learn things that we may not have other opportunities. The amazing gift that a teacher gives to students is pulling the veil back and letting them see the possibilities of things that they may not know about, to pull back the layers so that they can see what's in them that they may
Mm,
not see. And every whether it's been a coach, whether it's been a teacher, those that have given me the opportunities to be able or who have given me space to be able to just kind of explore my passions. And I give them a ton of credit for the individual I am today because it's helped me to be able to discover those things that, hey, that's not really my thing. And I can move
mhm,
into finding the space where I work. So I think the thing that educators get is the long-term success of their students. I think it's being able to recognize that you may be given a very small moment for a student to try something or do something, but you never know what that may spark in that student. Future filmmakers may be uncovered in your classroom. Future educators may be in your room. It is such an amazing moment to be able to give students the space for them to be able to create and to explore and to learn and to grow. I would also say it really allows for teachers to move beyond feeling like they need to be in control of all aspects of a student's journey as they're learning. So much of the thing I love about creativity is the exploration, the discovery, the those aha moments of you went in with this goal to do this thing and you find yourself in such a different space and it's a good place to be. And then when you come back to do this another time, you have all of that knowledge that you can draw on. So you're constantly giving this opportunity for students to grow and to evolve and to have new skill sets that they can apply in a variety of learning situations. So much of that I would just say are benefits that teachers can gain as they are bringing creativity into the classroom.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I particularly enjoy this idea of kind of inciting a light in students. You might meet somebody in third or fourth grade if you're a primary teacher. And at that point, they probably aren't thinking about what their career path is, but they might be able to notice these little tidbits that put them on the right path. Like, dang, I really like to draw. Or when I was asked to teach something in front of the class, I really, really enjoyed that. And as you start to have all of those different pebbles throughout your K through 12 journey, theoretically, by the time you get to a place where you're making a decision, you've had these moments of creativity that allow you to really be a part of that. So I do think we have quite a bit to gain. And really, it's our students who have a lot to gain by being able to engage in creativity and have this opportunity to really see what they like. I think the quintessential question for educators is, how do I get started? They're like, all right, Al, like, you're right. I want to harness this idea of creativity amongst my students, and I want to have these big aha moments. But if I wanted to start with something like illustration or having students explore video creation in the classroom, how do I begin?
Yeah, that's oftentimes the question. And so I think oftentimes teachers want to be able to do it, but there's so many things that are on their plate, especially over the last few years and even before that. But I oftentimes just start where we have the conversation. It's not about hitting a home run every time you come up to bat when you're bringing video or creativity into the classroom. It's really about the small steps that you can take to be able to introduce and be able to gain traction and gain ground. I think one of the first thing I would say is consider all the things you're already doing and where are the places where you could have students have choice and be able to bring and create and do videos in the classrooms. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you can give some of that ownership to the students and some of those that ability to be able to choose what lane they want to go in when it comes to sharing what they know. So look at the things that you're doing, find the spaces where you can introduce those and just allow for the students to be able to go. And once again, going back to the community aspect, if you don't know what rubric that you how you could grade that, put it out into the community, put it out into the spaces where you can get feedback and you can have others share the best ways to do that. I'd also tell you one of the things I love sharing is creating documentaries and doing 1 minute documentaries is an amazing way for you to bring video into the classroom. It is a great way for you to have students discover things that they're passionate about and have them share them in a format that is really short, but can be very impactful. And it's really empowering students to be able to understand that their voice matters and they need to be able to share the stories that they're passionate about and share the stories that really hit home with them. So that's something I would highly encourage you to do. Feedback, looking when you're providing feedback, it's not necessarily students recording, even having to record and share feedback, but simply giving feedback to students in video format adds that additional element, and then allowing them to also do that at times can really get this comfortableness or this ability for you to feel like it's not a major burden when you're starting to introduce video into the classroom. So many times we just think that we have to do class period after class period, and I have to do hours on hours to be able to when I'm talking about doing video in the classroom or even doing anything that is creative. And it's really about the small steps. It's the making the small tweaks in the things that you're doing, looking at ways that you can provide value, giving students an opportunity to capture the things that they're passionate about. I've shared one activity I love doing is when you have students going on field trips or when they're going out, even young students. There's great tools out there where you can capture images or even just pulling out a phone and being able to capture what's happening during this time and putting it together to tell a story. Those things are really powerful and you can really gain value and gain traction as you start to build on that and even discover the interests of students. So it's really about taking those small steps and not feeling like you have to do everything at your first at bat. So sorry, opening day was not too long ago, so I'm gonna use the baseball analogies as much as possible.
I like it. I'm a huge Marlins fan, which means that I am constantly in a state of sadness, but it's opening day, so I still have that optimism that maybe this season will be different. I There's so much I like about what you just said, Al, in terms of starting small. And one thing that I think is also interesting to point out is the time of the year that we're in, right? Like it is winding down. And for me, when I was in the classroom, this was an opportunity to be able to try things in a much more low stakes environment. So you mentioned having students snap some photos. This is the time of the year where you might see an uptick in field trips to be able to try it out and see what that looks like, try it on for size. Maybe you were racing through curriculum and didn't have an opportunity to really give students the choice that you would have liked. Maybe that's something that you can try out in that last unit. And I think what happens when you start small and you make these deliberate steps, you build up this level of comfortability in yourself that you know exactly how to do it. You're like, okay, I've spoken to my community. I know a rubric to be able to judge these creative projects, and I'm good to go. And when we think about a new crop of students next year, when we start small, we also build up their comfortability in being asked to do more than what is the norm. They might have never, ever encountered a teacher who said, "Hey, you have a choice in how you demonstrate your learning." That's a novel concept to some of our kids. And giving them the opportunity to be able to explore that is also cool in terms of these small, deliberate steps.
That's the environment that we live in. When our students go home, they jump on Netflix, they jump
Mm,
on, if they are gamers, they jump into systems where they have choices as far as the games that they bring in. So giving them that flexibility to be able to find those things that they're interested in, we've been able, or they have slants for it. You are going to have students that are writers. You are going to have students that want to be filmmakers. Are going to have students that want to create something that may be more audio based. And so finding those spaces where you can give them those choices is so important. And I love that you brought up photography, and which is a huge passion of mine. There are so many ways that you can blend photography and video together. And one of the things I've shared is 16 questions, giving students a single image and having them come up with 16 questions that are about that image to get them thinking and get them just to process. And so, and as it's a great warm up as they get started. And typically what happens is they come up out the gate. Here are 4 or 5 questions that they can just hammer out. But then as they start getting closer to 12, 13, it becomes harder and they have to really think outside the box and kind of process what they're doing. And I would also say video and photography are both great ways for students to share where their mind is and where their emotions are. And this is, if the past 24 months have taught us anything, is we all need to be able to have the opportunity to be able to process the emotions that we're dealing with. So being able to get out and being able to explore and take moments to be able to have those mental breaks and using learning and things like video and photography to be able to enhance that is something I would highly encourage. So whether it's doing, one of my favorite activities is steps, where you just simply give students a certain amount of steps and have them go, and wherever they land, they have to take a unique photo. And it
mm.
really forces students to think through not taking the same photo over and over again, but starting to look above them and below and really be able to process what's around them. So many great ways where you can just kind of initiate the curiosity and the thinking of students so that they can feel more comfortable as you move deeper into the learning experiences that you want to create for them.
Certainly. So we talked a bit about how do we get started. And theoretically, if we use some of these strategies throughout the year and we start small and create these deliberate steps, at some point we have students who genuinely have identified an interest and might even be content creators in their own right. How do we go beyond that initial step to continue to nurture that curiosity and that passion in our students?
Yeah, another, I would say, great question because there are so many of those students that are in a classroom. So one of the things I start off with, and I encourage educators, there's a great documentary, and I love documentaries. It's called Make. It was created by Music Bed, and it is free for you to watch, but it is a great insight into individuals who want to pursue the field of creativity, whether that's a musician, whether that's a filmmaker, wherever that may be.
Mhm.
So it gives some incredible insights that I think would be beneficial to educators to be able to see. I would say, how do we give those, or how do we nurture those? Is one, acknowledging it with your students and letting them know that you see that in them, and understand where they want to go or what they want to pursue. To give, once again, that acknowledgement of you're wanting to be that support. You're wanting to be able to move barriers so that they can pursue that if that's something they're truly passionate about. Getting them connected to communities that are out there. So one of the things I love about the day and age that we live in is that it's very easy to be able to jump in and find a community that is focused around that specific area that a student may want to pursue, and look for local opportunities for them to get connected, whether it's student filmmaking clubs, whether it's filmmaking competitions, whatever those may be. Getting your students those opportunities and putting them in front. One, it communicates that this person took time out of their day beyond the classroom to go look up resources that would be beneficial. That for me was one of the most impactful thing is I saw teachers giving me those opportunities and saying, "Hey, I came across this. This would be something that I think you should do." That encouragement went a long way for me to be able to buy into the thought process that I could do this.
Mhm.
So finding those opportunities to be able to share, giving and opportunities for students if they're interested in being able to explore something in your classroom that may be outside the norm, and allowing them to be able to create and share that talent skill set with others. So not just with the artifact of learning, but could that student teach your class how to do something? So you have a student who's really interested in video. Could you give them 5 minutes to be able to give an overview? Could you take off the burden of you as a teacher having to teach your class how to do something, and give that student who is passionate, who would spend 12 hours just learning a new element of that to be able to share with the other students in the class? Those things are great ways. And then I would also say finding free tools. We know that there is software, especially when it comes to video, can be very expensive, but there are a lot of great organizations that have actually provided free tools that are available. You may have a student who really wants to dive deep into filmmaking. There are great tools to get started with, but then there's also this need to be able to understand how to use a nonlinear editor, to be able to use tools like Premiere and Final Cut and DaVinci Resolve. One of the things I love about DaVinci Blackmagic Designs DaVinci Resolve is you can go and download that program for free and be able to use roughly about 95% of it to just get comfortable in editing on a platform that would allow for you to make full length feature films that have been made. So it's really about providing students with the resources, but beyond anything, even if you didn't look for resources or share those opportunities, simply acknowledging and encouraging students to pursue those things goes a long way. And I can speak from personal experience on that.
For sure. And it's interesting because I think almost all of us who have found some success, which is everyone, everybody finds their own level of success, but we can almost uniformly look back at a teacher who noticed something in us. For me, I remember being in middle school and a teacher maybe got a little tired of telling me to stop talking and was like, you know what? Why don't you join the speech and debate team? And then I had this outlet to be able to talk in a more structured fashion. For you, it was this teacher who noticed this opportunity for you to be an illustrator, and then look where that small tidbit has taken you. And I like how you have posited this idea of, hey, let's start with something that we can all do. We all notice these sort of sparks of creativity or sparks of awesomeness in our kids. Let's just call that out, right? And if we have a little bit of extra time, let's figure out how we can actually nurture that through free resources or maybe even paid resources when we have opportunities to speak with parents to really be able to nail that down and have students be able to explore that. That's cool. And it also gives us this really cool opportunity to be able to nurture that student teacher relationship and make sure that every kid in our classroom feels seen.
Yeah, absolutely. There is so much that can happen by just taking those moments. And I'm going to fully acknowledge that the life of an educator is it's so much of giving.
Mm,
I don't know an educator, a quality educator who has not invested time well beyond the hours. Quite honest, even those educators that may not be fully invested in the profession, they've sacrificed time as well. So we know that at the core that educators give and sacrifice. What I would just encourage you is just to not feel like it's a burden that you need to take all on your own. There are great organizations that are willing to provide resources. I would encourage you even to reach out to organizations or companies if you have students that you go, hey, this tool would be great to be able to get the hands into students. Reach out and find a way that maybe there can be some support that could be
mhm.
provided. Because one of the things I mean, part of the work I'm doing now is working more with ed tech companies. I am constantly amazed at the willingness to be able to provide those tools. I mean, even if it's whether it's at a discounted rate or whether it's at the free for a period or whatever it may be, don't feel like you can't access because maybe there's a paywall or something that's
Mm.
there. But ask, reach out, lean onto the communities because you never know what may be available. And then once again, you are not necessarily going to be that person who is going to see everything that comes out of it, but it is those sparks. It is those moments that you create for students. And you also just have to understand that you may unlock for students things that they in themselves have not even discovered. So look for those opportunities to be able to create for students, look for opportunities for you to be able to connect them to resources and reach out. If there is something where you're just running into a wall and you can't figure it out, I guarantee you there are resources available.
Yeah, I love that in terms of both the acknowledgement that I'm sure there are teachers listening right now who are incredibly tired and have given every portion of themselves to students, and also this bit of help that exists in these communities and resources that we might need to do a little bit of digging, but they are out there to help us as educators and primarily to help our students as well.
I just want to touch on this really quickly because I do have a background as an administrator. And one of the things I just want to quickly, you mentioned it earlier, but I just want to call it out. If you're an administrator, one of the things that can be very disheartening is as educators are bringing creativity to the classroom, having that administrator walk past and then them see what I often call educational noise and want to pull that teacher to the side and start asking questions not to understand, but are asking questions that may be, hey, we need to get back to the norm and we need to make sure that we're not wasting time. I would encourage you as an administrator to pop in and to observe with the lens of wanting to understand and to be able to see the value and the importance of being able to create those opportunities for students. Give the support because it's oftentimes those infancy moments, those moments where you're trying something new. And I would just encourage any administrator just to realize that and just be remember when they were in the classroom of just trying something and making that step to be able to give this opportunity for your students that you want to make sure that you're encouraging. You want to make sure that you're walking in with a smile on your face because you're seeing even when it falters or even when it doesn't look refined, that it is bringing value into the classroom. And so I just want to encourage administrators. There's so much power in that presence when they walk in. And I would just encourage you to share. And I would even encourage educators to invite people into your classroom when you're doing these things, because just building that confidence can go a long way. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and that's incredibly valuable. I remember being a young teacher and an administrator walks in your room and your heart just drops, right? You nervous, your palms are sweaty, and an Eminem song isn't even on. You're just like, what is happening right now? And I do particularly enjoy that advice of inviting administrators in when you're trying something new and trying something novel, because that kind of gives you the power as an educator to seek that feedback versus it being something that is spontaneous and something to be avoided. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think if we're calling a spade, for many teachers, especially depending on what your school environment is, it's like, yeah, thank you so much for this, Al, but I'm not sure that my principal or my AP or my instructional coach is going to be as gung ho on sparking creativity as I might be, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And so just know that there's so much data that is available where the value of creativity and bringing it into the classroom, and just simply having a moment to just kind of think and reflect on one of the most sought after skills is being able to be creative problem solvers in the workforce. And so we know that it prepares students to be successful. So the more we can create the opportunities to be able to be comfortable in things that are new and unique, it can go a long way for the success of our students. So please have a little patience and kindness with each other. And as administrators, just know the value of your voice of encouragement, much like educators when they're speaking to students and giving that spark of encouragement to them as well.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I want to ask one more question there in our segment where we ask every single one of our EdTech heroes to share some tips and advice for teachers. I think that you have a very unique social location because you've been on a lot of different sides of education. You've been an educator, you've been an administrator, and now someone who is working in that ed tech space to understand the business side of education and how technology can be effectively implemented. But if you put yourself back in the shoes of an educator who is trying to convince an administrator that this is a worthwhile activity, and you only had one argument to make, what argument would that be? How would you talk to that administrator who maybe needs a little bit of coaxing to understand the value of creativity in the classroom?
Great question. I think one of the so first of all, I'll say I am always and will always be an educator. I put on different layers on top of that, but I am at my core will always be an educator. I think it comes back to, and I've oftentimes said this, it's the stories. I think being able to understand and getting beyond the data
Hmm.
of looking at this score that this student had on this, but it's the genuine stories that can be shared of the impact of this bringing creativity in the classroom. And so my argument would be uncovering those stories, showing the stories and making it tangible for them to see the impact, the engagement that increases, the empathy that is developed from your students when they are telling someone else's story or even telling their own story. That goes so far in being able to move the ball forward. So I think if anything, I would say it's really identifying those stories. Now, I know that some would want something much more practical. And what I would tell you is that when you look at those that are wanting to be able to understand the value, it goes back to what I said earlier. It's open up your room and try and create those opportunities and be open to having visitors come in to be able to see what you're doing. And then getting those moments to ask, hey, how do you see this went? So how could I improve on this? Is there something that you're seeing? Because here's what I saw. I saw this student who hasn't been engaged
Hmm.
in other ways is now completely engaged. So now they're seeing what you saw. They're seeing, getting a better understanding of why you are doing the things that you're doing, what it's creating for students. But then you're also not negating those things that are really important to them, that they can also give insights in, and then having a marriage or a blending of those two things, or those things come together. I am always a fan of being as collaborative as possible. So I think if you can do those things, I think it can go a long way to convincing administrators to be open and be willing to be able to embrace bringing creativity to the classroom.
Yeah.
That was my sneaky way of giving more than one.
We will allow it because it was valuable. But yeah, certainly in terms of inviting folks in. And I really like this idea of changing perspective for an administrator. I think even the most collaborative, awesome administrators that you could have as an educator still don't have all of the context that you have, right? Like they're coming in and they've got snapshots of your classroom and you've got this entire movie that you're cultivating over the course of the year. So being able to provide that background and saying, hey, this is what happened yesterday. This is what happened 3 weeks ago. And this is why I'm thinking about this a little bit differently than you may be, and starting to have that conversation. And I think the other thing that you pointed out is a lot of times we might think of these administrators as this big bad other, but every administrator has spent some time in the classroom. And I think if they are given the opportunity to be able to engage in that conversation, they can put themselves in your shoes. But sometimes we don't necessarily have that conversation to be able to provide that context, you know?
Absolutely, and I'll just speak personally from experience. They're scared and they're dealing with things as well. So they are dealing with challenges that you may not be aware of, and much like times happens in educators, someone who's in the classroom, you may have outside forces that are clouding your understanding of certain things.
Mm.
So oftentimes it's being able to have those moments of being able to, okay, let's focus on this. Let's have a moment to really dive into this piece, and giving them the space to do that can go a long way for them to truly understand. There is so much that is going on right now, whether in so many spaces that are impacting the classroom, that are impacting campuses. There are so many people that are exiting the profession. And what I would just say is there has to be some grace that is given to be able to help support across the board. So just like you said, removing this mysticism around an administrator and the negativity of them joining and coming into your room, I would just encourage, just open up the door and just allow for that to be able to be an open invite, to be able to see the things that you're doing. And you never know, it could be the spark on your campus where all of a sudden these resources are being used, and it opens up opportunities for you to share the success and the student stories that come out of your work. So
For sure. For sure. Thank you so much for joining EdTech Heroes. You've given us some valuable insights on sparking creativity amongst students, effectively navigating relationships with administrators. This was dope. If you're listening, be sure to follow Al on Twitter. He is at EduCopilot, and check out educopilot.com. I am your host, Neff Dukes, and I'm really looking forward to seeing each and every one of you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of EdTech Heroes, presented by Screencastify.